July 2014. Before we start, can I remind everybody that the meeting will be recorded and that the recording will subsequently be available for public listening. So do I have any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Canon Paisley. I note at the start of the meeting, Councillors Brodie and Dick are not yet present, and also the teacher rep, Elaine Dennis.
Thank you. And do we have any declarations of interest? Councillor Davidson?
Sorry, it was just to record apologies for Councillor Dick.
Thank you.
So if we can move to item 3, the minute of the meeting of the 27th of May 2014. Are we in agreement this is a correct recording? Thank you. Moving swiftly on to item 4, the Educational Services Budget. We have Karen McNish hiding behind the laptop as far as I can see. Is there anything you want to add to your report, Karen? Yeah. Gillian.
Thank you. On behalf of the Director, can I offer a synopsis of the activity-based budget that we have in front of you? All of the services within the Education ABB have some form of statutory requirement, and they're mainly governed by the Scotland Schools Act. But there is discretion regarding the level and approach to the provision of these services, and the ABB gives some detail, some considerable detail, as to the way we allocate our budget across our provision. The ABB is separated into 6 key sections: preschool, primary, secondary, children's integration, supporting learners, and then management and support services, the majority of which is the payments for PPP schools. So I'm sure we'll have some opportunity to discuss the detail, but I think it's quite helpful to give a shape of the budget before we do so. 70% of the budget, over 71% of the budget is actually allocated to staff. So the vast majority of our budget is people. Property and PPP are almost 20%. We pay 5% of our budgets as payments to other bodies. And 3% of our budget are supplies, services and administration. So you can see the vast majority of our spend is on our teaching and non-teaching staff. If we look at this in a different way and look at it in terms of primary and secondary schools, about 36% of our budget is on secondary schools and 30% of our budget is on primary schools. Supporting learners is 11% of the budget. Preschool is 4%. And the Children's Integration Unit is 1.2%. So I think overall that gives a shape of where our money goes, and the details on benchmarking and performance are included within the ABB. It's actually very similar to last year's in terms of what we've reported, but there are 2 or 3 significant changes. The first is that the supporting learners section has been altered to be more in line with the service review. Previously, the majority of supporting learners expenditure was cut up into preschool, primary and secondary. For the purpose of the supporting learners review, it's been helpful to look at all of that aggregated together. The ABB reflects that. For this financial year, £1.5 million was transferred from DG First to Education for facilities management. As you are aware, the janitors and playground supervisors came back into education services as from the 1st of April. That has been transferred successfully and the budget has followed that. So the ABB reflects that change. And also £0.8 million was transferred from children's integration to social work services. So there was always that payment over to social work services, but to simplify accounting and budgetary planning processes, that social work proportion of the budget is no longer reported as part of the children's integration budget. So those are the key points as I see them, but I'm happy to take any questions, as will Karen.
So I'll throw it open to the floor for discussion. Alistair?
Thanks, Chair. I'm looking at the foot of page 16 and the last sentence saying that although there are statutory requirements associated with the provision of preschool education, there is local discretion regarding the level and approach of the provision. Does that discretion apply to the time in the calendar year when the delivery of preschool education takes place, or do we separate out the partnership provider delivery and the delivery within our own establishments? That's sort of two questions.
I think along with primary and secondary schooling, there is discretion in terms of how it is delivered by the methodology and in the timings. We've changed our enrolment procedures. We've got flexibility in terms of who provides and how long the periods of care are and the way that that is shaped. There are no specific guidances on some of the key elements as there would be in primary and secondary schools.
So for the avoidance of doubt, what you're saying is that we have our statutory obligations as per the Act, which is probably something I maybe should have asked at a subsequent agenda item, but that is set in stone, but with that we have the flexibility as to when it's delivered during the year.
In terms of when and who's providing it.
Right, thank you.
Any further questions? No? Okay. Can we move to recommendations in that case? That's on page 7. We've received Gillian's presentation on the activity-based budget, and it was remiss of me to say that Gillian's actually substituting for Colin Grant, who's on holiday in London at the moment. And we've reviewed and agreed the Education Service Budget 2014-15 is detailed in Appendix 2 to this report. Okay? Thank you. Moving to item 5, which is on page 83 of the report. This is the Revenue Budget 2013-14 outturn. Once again, we have Gillian and Karen. Is there anything you wish to add to the report?
I think it's important to highlight that this is a very positive position to enable us to deliver a break-even position despite the number of challenges that we did have to overcome during the year. There's been no significant change to the projected outturn that was given to you all in January. It is very much in line with that report. Again, just highlighting that Education Services have fully delivered all of their savings requirements for 13-14. And again, this overall position puts us in a really great platform to assist in budgeting going forward, and preparations are already in place to deliver £1.9 million worth of savings for this financial year. So overall, very positive.
So I'll open it up for debate. Yen?
Thank you, Chair. I'm extremely concerned about the Chinese teachers and Baines leaving on our council. I know he's been travelling over 7 secondary schools to teach Mandarin classes, and have our council put any contingency plans in place of his departure? Thank you.
Gillian?
Yes. There are very small numbers of children who are committed to SQA provision, and certainly they will be supported to complete their studies. And the Curriculum for Excellence team are looking at our overall modern language strategy, including Mandarin.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me come back. Does that mean, Gillian, the Mandarin classes will be continue? Is that what you're saying?
In terms of classes, I can't confirm that. I know that the individual pupils who have committed to SQA provision, who are actually studying examinations in Mandarin, they will be supported. I can't confirm, and I can certainly get back to you in terms of how we are going to do that. It's not going to be straightforward, but we can certainly ensure that we have our SQA provision confirmed.
Dick?
Thanks, Chair. There's, on page 83, there's a reported overspend of 44,000 in additional support for learning psychology. Does this suggest that the existing budget position is not sufficient to meet the needs of the children? That we should look at that, and that should colour and informed debate about future support for learning budgets.
A brief comment, and I know Karen and I spoke about this yesterday, but in the main, our support in schools, because we are maintaining many of our children in our region schools, what that brings are additional support needs. So it's very positive that we can support our children in our own schools as opposed to going out of authority placement, but that does bring challenges to keep the kids in those schools. And the service review for supporting learners will certainly take that on board, as well as perhaps the autism provision that we'll be looking at in a paper later on this morning.
David?
Hi, thanks, Chair. I think you partially answered what I was going to ask. I think on 3.3, I know in the past we suffered, if you like to put it that way, that a lot of people were coming into this area because of the services we provided to youngsters who needed additional support, and it would appear that we're still in that same position. It's no youngsters that are born and bred here, but they're moving in.
Yes, we do have families who come into Dumfries and Galloway, and we welcome our families and children and young people for Dumfries and Galloway, and we have an obligation to support them if they come in with additional support needs. So I'd like to think that it's a positive, but it does bring financial challenge.
Colin?
Thank you, Chair. It actually relates to what Richard said on page 83, the additional support for learning, the overspend, but it also ties into page 14, which was the 14,133 for supporting learners, which was 11%, I think you said, of the budget. I don't know, you probably won't have this information, but I would be very interested to know how that relates historically. I mean, has that went up? I mean, I would have thought that has went up dramatically over the years. I mean, is there any way we could get the information to see, you know, like 10, 15 years ago, whatever, is that going up and up and up every year? Because there seems to be more and more kids needing support.
Certainly there are more and more children needing support, and the service review has got very detailed figures in terms of the trends and the numbers compared to the rest of Scotland and our comparator authority. So yes, it's going up and up, and I don't have the detail to hand. Karen may be able to add some light on that, but we can certainly get that to you.
Karen?
I mean, I know there has, like, over the years been increases in budget, whether we could do a comparison with 15 years ago, but certainly the last 6 or 6, we could probably go back 5 or 6 years and do that analysis if you found it helpful.
Yeah, as with all these things, can you ensure that goes out to all members rather than just an individual? Thank you. Any further speakers?
Just a brief point, and again it's on the additional support for learning. It says that there's been a higher level of staff absence. We've managed sort of staff absences within education very well over the past few years. Is this just an unusual blip, sort of specifically related to a few individuals, or is it a problem with morale or stress or whatever within that sort of area of learning?
It's a cogent point, and yes, it is an issue. It's one we're going to have to look at. We have a new absence management project, if you like. We've got an improvement project next year, and we're looking at the absences per school on a month-by-month basis. It's targeted, but we have worked very hard over the last 3 or 4 years, and it does appear to be creeping back up again, and we have to look for the reasons behind that.
Any other speakers? Sorry. Jim?
Thanks, Chair. I note on page 84, repairs and maintenance was a pressure area across all sectors. Is there any indication that this pressure may reduce in the future?
Thank you. I think I might have to defer that one to our capital paper later on this morning, unless, Karen, you're able to give us anything. Claire is here as well, but Claire, would you be able to help us with this?
Thank you. We're aware of the repairs and maintenance budget and obviously the pressures on that. What we're doing is a review of the content and why that's happening, but what we're looking at it is in the wider positioning with the asset class to make sure that all our investment is undertaken on a comprehensive strategic basis to try and minimise expenditure and maximise effectiveness of expenditure as well. So I think in the immediate term I wouldn't see that budget item going down. I think it'll be under pressure, but all we'd say is we are aware of it and we are looking at it strategically across all our capital budgets to make sure our expenditure is targeted in the most effective way.
Yeah, can I just say on item 8, it does actually state that there will be a conditions survey report coming to the Education Committee in November. And I mean, I do think it's very important that we do have this continuous review of the conditions of our schools, because certainly when I came on the Education Committee, it was fairly evident that we didn't know which schools needed the investment, and so what started off as being a small leak in the roof ended up with the entire roof needing to be replaced. So it is something which we need to keep under review. Any other speakers? No. Can we move to the recommendations? Members are asked to note 2.1, an overall break-even position was delivered by Education Services for financial year 2013-14. Yep. 2.2, a closing balance of 2,215,000 in relation to the Education Services devolved school management accounts. And 2.3, the achievement stroke utilisation of the agreed savings policy development funding applied to the 2013-14 Education Services budget. Noted. Thank you. So if we move on to item 6, which is Dumfries Learning Town Learning Hub update. You'll remember that the Education Committee on the 27th of May noted that the shortlist from the available site options, King George V scores highest within the agreed criteria, and agreed in principle on this basis that King George V be the preferred site location for the Learning Hub, subject to public consultation through an Innisdale Area community event and consideration of the detailed costings and full affordability assessment. Now, at the Innisdale Area Committee on the 18th of June 2014, the committee unanimously agreed to recommend to the Education Committee that following public discussion and feedback, the King George V was a preferred site for the Innisdale Area Committee as indicated by the public present at this meeting, and that all comments from the public discussion groups would be created as an appendix to the minute of the meeting and inform the report to the Education Committee. So that is what is in the appendix, which begins on page 97. Is there anything you want to add to this, Claire?
No, Chair.
Can I throw it open? And remembering this is for noting. Alistair?
Thank you, Chair. Amongst the papers we received previously, there was one from the EIS executive stating that their preferred site for the hub was King George V. Do we know if, could we have clarification that this is the view of the wider membership of the EIS, and also what is the view of other teacher unions such as SSTA?
It was the EIS who actually submitted their recommendation from their secretary, and he actually spoke at the meeting of the area committee in favour of it. Ian?
Thanks, Chairman. Excuse me. Just kick off by saying that I attended the meeting. I heard what everybody said. Just looking briefly at the appendices, and the question that was asked was, do you agree that King George V be the preferred site location for the Learning Hub? Which I thought was finding the question in some terms, but what actually came out, and it isn't explicit within the appendices, the appendix that's there, is that King George V did come out first in every time, but then because of the way the question was worded, like in Group 4 it said 8 were yes and 6 were no, so it was almost marginally there. But what I was actually, when it finalised, I was with that group as it finalised, what was absolutely clear is that the 6 that said no actually preferred a wee bit closer to the town, which had been ruled out because of geographic reasons and constraints, traffic constraints, so on and so forth. So I think that was pretty much across the board, and that was recognised on the night. But it's what do we do here? So, I mean, it was a resounding yes for King George V. The Crichton would have been a site if accessibility and such like, but no, it was rolled out. It probably come third or fourth, probably third, I think, on the night, with the Dumfries Town Centre being the second option. So what do we actually do with this today? I mean, we're here, it's the note, but this is obviously should go forward and feed the further decision-making process. So that's what I'd like to get an understanding of that as well, please, Chairman.
Well, obviously it was agreed in principle on the basis that we carry out the consultation through the area committee, and we're still going through the costings, and Claire and her team are working on that at the moment. So there will be a report coming to a a later education committee meeting. Claire can possibly give us an indication of when that is. So the second part of the work is still ongoing. So it is moving forward. Claire would like to say something?
We felt it was important to present the findings from the public consultation quite quickly and relevantly and before the summer. And that reaffirms the instruction that we're given by Council to really focus on the costings and detail aspect now. So over the next couple of months, we'll be focusing on items in relation to the actual delivery of it. And as Councillor Lever said, we'll come to a future education committee. I would say that would be September or November. I'm just looking to keep a little bit of flexibility around that to make sure that we get a robust and comprehensive set of information to bring back to you.
Ian?
Thank you, Chair. I just wondering, is the public consultation link available on the Council's website, or is any other places put the information available to the public? Because a lot of people was not able to go to the 18th of June for the area committee meeting. So I just want the wider communities have that opportunities to voice their opinion.
Well, the outcome of the consultation, is that already on the website, the Learning Town?
The outcome of the consultation will be on the Nistale Area Committee aspect of the website, but I'll follow that up and make sure we've got clarity. We were obviously very proactive about promoting this within schools and teaching communities and parent communities. We did advise if MD wanted to make representation and weren't able to come in the night that they could email us, and we gave them opportunities to do that. All the information is uploaded on the Dumfries Learning Town part of the council website as well. So we gave people a number of different ways that they could communicate and access information.
Yeah.
Sorry, do you mean the public still have that opportunity to write to you? Is that what you mean?
Okay.
As with all aspects that we do, we always take forward and give people the opportunity to keep communicating with us about every aspect. But we have undertaken the exercise through the Nistale Area Committee as required by Council to make sure that we were compliant. So the formal part has been undertaken, but in all aspects we're always canvassing, appending and making sure that we're listening to people.
Colin?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like a plain English update on where we are or where we will be going for funding for the Dumfries Learning Hub. If the Scottish Government prefer the Crichton site and we don't choose that, we're going for the King George V, where does that leave us? I mean, how confident are we of receiving funding to take the project forward, and where's the funding coming from?
Well, I mean, this is one of the, in fact, possibly the main aim of the administration is to drive this Dumfries Learning Town project forward. So we will find the funding either through money coming from the government or within the council's own budget. Ian?
I think it was quite a good question that Colin asked here, but in regards to, because my understanding, if we go back 2 or 3 steps, is that Scottish Government's always said, listen, if you put up the right project, we could possibly back it, and probably will if it's innovative enough, is what they said. But we did make clear decisions with the council that we were going forward with this project, either or. It wasn't implicit. And that's, I keep reflecting back to that point myself. And they are definitely supporting the Crichton site, and the reasons are outlined why. And you can understand that if they want to go down that direction. But it's for this. I do think very strongly it's for the Dumfries and Galloway as a region and a locality that they should decide where the best education services are. And I think for the amount of money that the Scottish Government's actually offering into the preferred site and the extra build cost, it's almost negligible. It's hardly worth taking into consideration.
Dick?
Yeah, I think to develop the Learning Town properly, we will need government injection of cash into it, because it is a huge project, which will be a good project in the end, but there's a lot of financing for it. Just going back to previous discussion we had, the issue of King George playing fields is that the common good issue. I haven't yet seen in writing that this is not this is not a problem. We've had verbal assurances, but nothing in writing, so and no report for that. So we need that as well. And also, it's talked about a revised traffic flows for the Crichton We mentioned that at the last meeting as well. This is a question on the report. It's, I think it's a valid question, just as other questions that have been asked today are valid questions.
Well, this report is for noting the recommendation of the Nithsdale Area Committee.
Yeah.
I don't think we don't have any background.
The questions are the common good issue, when we're going to learn about that, because that should be updated as well. This is a Learning Hub update, and also where do we stand with the traffic flows at the Crichton.
We'll note that. Graham?
Thank you, Chair. Claire stated that we were going to get a report, and she thought maybe September, on the further report and the consideration of the costings, etc., etc. Will that include a traffic impact assessment? And I presume if we're getting a report in September or November, you maybe said, was it September? September or November, that information was not available at the area committee for the public to debate. Is that correct?
Yeah, that information wasn't there.
Just to say, to confirm, I said September or November because I want to make sure that we have robust information when we come back to committee. We would not anticipate doing further traffic impact assessments at this stage, but what I can do is just refresh and remind everybody of all the work that's been carried out to date, but it's certainly part of the future work streams.
Peter?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's very important that we give the people of Dumfries and Galloway what they want and not be dictated to by the Scottish Government. In this consultation, just under 70% of people that have been asked to express a view have gone in favour of King George the Fifth site. And I think we maybe ought to add that to the recommendation that 70% of people, or 66.6% of people questioned in the consultation, actually preferred the George V site.
Ronnie?
Running out of money for the meter, but just on the learner, just to clear something up, there's been a lot of speculation. The learning town as a whole is something that is a great ambition for Dumfries, and it will, help throughout Dumfries and Galloway as well with the whole aspect of the learning and how we learn. And part of that is obviously the Learning Hub. Now, there's been a lot of speculation in the press and that, and there's at least one councillor trying to say about it's just a glorified community centre. And I don't think that's very helpful for the whole aspect of the Learning Hub and what we're trying to achieve in Dumfries. Could I just clarify for once and for all, is the Learning Hub a glorified community centre?
Claire?
Thank you, Chair. I would quite categorically say no, the Learning Hub is not a glorified community centre. It's a new form of learning environment which will attract and promote all ages of people to learn in a different and more dynamic and innovative manner, and it will also provide a better range of opportunities so that people can feel inspired and engaged with the skill set and interests that they have.
Can I just say, before I bring in Jim, Ian Wood published the final part of his report, I think, between the Education Committee meeting and the Nithsdale Area Committee. And looking at his recommendations within his report, the Learning Hub fits perfectly into what he was suggesting in terms of vocational training, etc. So I would expect that the Scottish Government would fall over itself to put investment into it if it's doing it on a fair basis. Jim?
Thanks, Chair. Simply to note that the outcome of this consultation is consistent with the options appraisal information previously presented to members.
Thank you, Jim. Rob?
Thank you, Chairman. It's nice to know we're still on first name terms. As it's been raised, I think it's probably fair to make entirely clear that the unfortunate report in the media, and I will be fair to the member concerned, who did emphasise it was a personal opinion, is nothing more than that. It's not reflective of the position of any group that I'm aware of, certainly not mine. And I absolutely do not agree that the Learning Hub will be a glorified community centre. I think last time we met I referred to it as the keystone in a however many £1 million we're at now project, but it's absolutely crucial to the delivery of the whole thing, and it will substantially revolutionise, I think, the way that we do education in Dumfries and Galloway. So I want to make that point and get it on the record. The other question or point that I wanted to raise, although it's not specifically in the report, it has been alluded to by a number of speakers, and that regards the potential for Scottish Government support. I want to ask whether the administration will be willing to disclose at the appropriate time the discussions that it's had to date with the Scottish Government as regards potential support.
Yeah, I don't see any problem with regard to that. Yep, okay. Is there anything you want to say? No. Yep. Any further speakers? No. In that case, can we go to the recommendations? Members are asked to note the outcome of the public consultation at the Nithsdale Area Committee on the 18th of June 2014, and the summary of the facilitator sessions is detailed at the appendix. Happy to note?
Can we just add that on that 66.6% of people during the consultation actually preferred King George V site?
Yeah, I think we might. Yeah, we might have to. Yen?
Thank you, Chair. On the same point, I believe the majority of the people in the Nithsdale Area Committee community meeting were saying they would prefer if there's a site in town centre. But given the options on the table on the night, they do say they prefer to have King George V.
That was inherent in the progress which took us to that meeting, that there isn't a site within the town centre. Okay, can we move to item 7? Yep. Rural school provision, Sorbie Primary School. This is to inform members of the statutory consultation process undertaken with regard to the proposed closure of Sorbie Primary School and to request agreement to proceed with the closure. The school itself has been mothballed for the last 18 months, 16 months, and this is just formally to agree the consultation has been undertaken and been looked at by Education Scotland, and I think they're in agreement with that. Is there anything you want to add to the report?
No, Chair.
Members? Graham, what's your name?
I've only been here for 7 years, don't worry. Yeah, I mean, it's in my ward, this school, and it's sad that we've got to this stage, but it's obvious that there are no children in the school. Luckily, Garliston is only 2 or 3 miles away, it's not very far away, and whilst it's sad to see a school closing like that, I fully support the recommendations that are here.
Thank you, Graham. Jim?
Thanks, Chair. Simply to state that perhaps the turnout at the consultative meeting was indicative of the fact that the local community accept that closure is inevitable.
Thank you, Jim. No other speakers? Can we move to the recommendations? Members are asked to note the contents of the statutory consultation report on the proposed closure of Sorbie Primary School. 2.2, agree to implement the proposal to close Sorbie Primary School. And 2.3, agree that the Director of Education Services should notify Scottish Ministers of the decision of 2.2 within 6 working days of this committee, in accordance with the Schools Consultation Scotland Act 2010. Okay. So if we move to item 8, the Property Buildings Schools Asset Class Education Services Proposed Capital Plan 2014-15. This report asks members to agree the detail of the proposed capital programme for 2014-15 for the properties/buildings asset class, and to advise members that following receipt of data from updated condition surveys, detail for the future year's capital programmes are currently being updated and will be presented, as we said earlier, for consideration at the November committee meeting. We have Lauren Foss to speak to this. Is there anything you want to add, Lauren?
Not at this stage, no thanks.
3.5. details the major investments which are being proposed. So can I throw it open to the floor? Colin?
Thank you, Chair. Just a specific question on 3.5, the list of the works being progressed. I frequently go to Creetown Parent Council meeting, and every time I go, and I'm sure it'll be the same with Patsy and Jane, the state of the school is the major discussion. Leaks, windows that won't close, toilets that flood, etc. I don't even see it, not only in 3.5, I don't see any mention of it on page 139, and I would just like an update as to what is being done about that.
Lauren?
I think the position that we're in just now, we have the funding allocated that's available this financial year, and the detail in the report suggests that we're waiting on the new condition surveys being complete on all primary schools. So that'll give us the most up-to-date picture across all the primary provision, and within that, Creetown should, if it is in that poorer condition, come up to the top of our priorities for investment. Obviously, taking note of what's being said there just now, it's something that will get Property and Architectural Services to go out, have a look, review. There has been some money spent through the Planned Preventative Maintenance Programme, but the condition survey will highlight it if there's any specific issues there that need to be addressed. And then with that detail, we'll remap out our financial obligations for next financial year and the following.
Yeah, I think that does demonstrate why we do need to keep, this constant review of the conditions of the schools. Otherwise, we just allocating money on an ad hoc basis. So it is important that we continue to do this. Any other speakers? Ian?
Just to kind of kick off, and if I see 3.5, you've already alluded to, Chairman. There's a load of work going on there. I just wonder, in regards to access, in particular during school times, class time, what is the policy we have in place for that, for workmen, clerk of work, so on and so forth? I would like to get an understanding, because I have had some concerns raised, so just get an understanding on what our policies are there.
Lauren?
There is a document in place that I think it's probably best to circulate that, but effectively the detail within there is that any ad hoc contractors do need to make contact with the school in advance. Anything that's programmed in, the school will be involved in the health and safety aspects of that so that it can be managed effectively. For larger projects, there will be the link with the contractor themselves, and there'll be weekly, fortnightly, monthly health and safety meetings, depending on the necessity of it. But it's something that has been raised previously, so I think sharing the document would with members and probably with the schools again, just to reinforce that position, would be helpful.
Peter?
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, thank you for progressing the refurbishment of the loos at St Mungo's. That'll be hugely beneficial, and see that that's to be completed by the end of the holidays. Just on the subject of the heating system that's going into Lochmaven Primary, could you let me know what sort you're putting in, please?
A decision's been taken to go with a biomass solution in there.
Sorry, presumably pellets, yeah?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to see page 139, Local Bricks Primary School, the proposal for rationalisation, and the work is now completed in February 2014 for £100,000. Can I ask for further information? What improvements have you done to the local bricks primary schools? I believe the work needs to be done, and it was long and overdue, but I'm so happy to see work is completed. But I just need further information. Thanks.
Lauren?
The detail of that's actually coming through a joint piece of working that we're doing directly with the pupils of the school. We've done almost a post-occupancy evaluation of the existing building from the pupils' perspective. They've taken ownership of that piece of work. They've set the questions. They've reviewed all areas of the school. They've determined what the key stakeholders are. So that's still just to be finalised and pulled together. I would suggest, from the information that's available so far, that the key areas that they're looking at is obviously an overhaul of the toilet provision and some of the classrooms inside there. It's a complicated site with a tower block, a link corridor, and the dining and games hall. So, you know, it's trying to marry all that together so it works really effectively. The 100,000 that was spent in there, well, going back historically, there's been a lot of money spent on upgrading to the kitchen. There's been money spent on nursery toilets. There's been wee bits and pieces around those kind of areas down the nursery, early years wing of the school. The rest of the future spend coming forward will be determined effectively by the work that we're doing with the pupils and the staff in the school.
Again, you're back.
Thank you very much, Grant, for your comment, and I shall make my visit to the school. Thank you.
Karen?
Thanks, Chair. It's just going back to the policy that's in place about people visiting the schools during school hours. I was wondering how that is actually reviewed and evaluated for its robustness and effectiveness, because I've had it brought to my attention that a workman has just turned up at school unannounced, and when staff has actually approached to say, we didn't realise you were coming, they were told that, well, why should they, because it was nothing to do with them, which I think is quite concerning, and in particular when the head teacher doesn't even know that somebody's actually turning up. So it was just to see how that is actually evaluated.
Lauren?
Our health and safety officer is reviewing all of our management arrangements for education and the contractor side of it. So that document's being reviewed and upgraded just now as we speak. I think the important thing is how we link with property and architectural services, because ultimately they have responsibility for the workmen going out. So we need to work effectively with that department to ensure that our health and safety arrangements are adhered to by that service as well. And I know that there's no reason why that shouldn't be the case. I think this might be one contractor out of everything that goes out there, but it's one that I've spoken to Louise Matheson about already, so she is aware of that.
Sorry, I've got Jim Dempster.
Thanks, Chair. A very simple question for Lara, and there's a huge amount of investment in Sanker Primary School, and I'm delighted to see that. And it's about the wording in 3.5 Sanker Primary School, where it talks about external render end of life being processed and being replaced. As part of the same works, all external windows and door will be replaced. I thought there were about 5 external doors. Are you saying you're only replacing one of these, or is that simply a spelling error?
It'll be all doors, so it'll be a spelling error.
Thank you.
Sorry, Jim Cole.
Thanks, Chair.
And it's a new skill. It's no Sanker Old Primary School. Different matter altogether.
Thanks for the clarification, Jim.
A couple of points for Lauren. Firstly, an assurance that the conditions survey will definitely form part of the detail for the November meeting.
Yeah, I can give that assurance. Yeah, the process has started just now. We have a number of the primary schools reassessed already, but a lot of work will take place after the summer holidays. It would have started now, but due to access issues, and also actually it makes sense for the staff doing the work to talk with the staff within the building as well.
And the second point, with regard to the Cochrane Hall, the construction compound, the siting of the compound, have talks taken place with the Community Trust with regard to permission for that compound?
I was down there a couple of weeks ago and shared the detail with them, so they're aware of it. They have a copy of the drawings, so they're quite comfortable with that. I think the pressure was continued access to their entrance while the works were taking place because of the proximity of the two buildings, but that's been dealt with.
Ronnie?
Just a quick query. There's a lift installation which is through disability access at Lochside Primary School, and that's been completed. Could you tell me how much that cost?
Lauren?
Off the top of my head, I think the whole project was around 350,000, but there was toilet replacements and things in there. But I can get you the full detail and the breakdown.
It's fine, thanks.
Crowds.
Thanks very much, Chairman. Chairman, I've got to leave shortly, so therefore that's the only reason I'm coming in. It's in regards to the recommendations. I don't know if in case you're not heading there at the moment, but in regards to what's been brought up previously by Karen, and I've experienced that myself in regards to access to schools, I think head teachers should have control over that, and if somebody turns up unannounced, they should certainly be able to say, listen, if it's not convenient to them, come back at a more convenient date, and should be agreed. So under recommendation 2.2, if you read it right through to the end, it's just a proposal. I'll let yourselves work it out if you'll accept it, or if this is acceptable to the committee. If you read right up to 2016-17, before it goes to the November committee, if you could fill in there something like that, and an update report on visitor access to schools during class time. And I say visitors, that's internal to the council and external contractors. It's across the board. That's where my complaints are coming from. It's as much internal as external. And I think mostly when this named person legislation digs in and the head teacher does become most likely the responsible person, there is and possibly could be a real issue when it comes to the security of kids in our schools. So could we ask for a report to come back in the November time as well on the policy document, but an update of that even, so we've got a clear understanding how that would come forward, please?
Sorry, Gillian, you want to say? Gillian's also informed me it also ties in with the LETS policy later in, so yeah, I don't see any problem with adding that to the recommendations. So, can we move to the recommendations? Oh, sorry, Peter.
Sorry, I forgot to ask, Lan. When do we expect the boiler in Lochmaven to be up and running?
I've not got that detail on me just now, I'm afraid. The decision was just taken fairly recently to go with the biomass solution, so Property and Architecture will be working up the scheme to do that, and when it's available, we'll share that.
I think generally, if members have got particular items they want to raise, then if they let officials know beforehand, then it would be useful for them in terms of being able to present the information, just as a generality. So can we move to the recommendations? Members are asked to 2.1 agree the funding allocations within the Property, Buildings, Schools Asset Class Capital Programme for 2014 set out in 15, as set out in Appendix 1 to this report. Can we agree that? Yeah. 2.2 agree to receive further details on the strategic future programmes and financial allocations for the Property, Buildings, Schools Asset Class Capital Programme for 2015-16 and 2016-17 in November committee. I think we've got an extension to that. Together with an update on visitors access policy. Okay, agreed? Yeah. 2.3 agree to the continuation of the lease for additional space at Sorbie Primary School with other terms and conditions to be agreed by the Senior Manager of Property and Architectural Services. Agreed? Thank you. So if we move to item 9, Autism Strategy Outline Business Case. As you recall, on 14th of February 2013, Education Committee agreed to a bid to the Corporate Change Fund to sustain the development of local provision for the education of children and young people with autism, and funding of £315,000 for the autism strategy was agreed by Policy and Resources on 26th of February 2013. So the purpose of this report is to provide members with autism strategy outline business case, ask for comments and to seek approval to implement the recommendations within the outline business case. I must say, congratulate the authors on this report. I thought it was an excellent report and full of very useful information, which tells us where we are and where we want to be. We have Andy Marchison, who I think did a great deal of the work on the report. Once again, it is a very, very good report. So I'll ask either Andy or Claire just to actually outline what we're intending to do in terms of this outline business case.
Thank you, Chair. I won't regurgitate the whole of the report, but just to emphasise the key points. We felt it was important to really do a deep and thorough review of autism about what it is, raise awareness, what's happening in the region and what's happening nationally, to make sure you as elected members had all that range of information there. And I think we found it a very interesting exercise. We worked closely with the ASL review as well, because there's a lot of overlaps there. So that, the key items that we're looking for discussion and permission to progress is about creating a very clear strategy for the region, to acknowledge a lot of the good work that's going on, but to acknowledge we want to improve. We see a key item about the staff development training programme. We want to empower principal teachers and learning centres to really take this area forward. We acknowledge the geographical disparity of our region, and in that basis the importance of having centres and areas to make sure that children and families can actually access provision where they need it. We want to explore options to improve the learning centres in each of those regions and getting a consistent approach across the region. We think that's very important. And we want to take a step forward in looking at the Specialist Education Centre with supported living arrangements. And we've changed the language very deliberately around there, because in the initial submission we were looking at residential centres. It's very important from a lot of the work that we've seen and a lot of the best practice we believe is there, that the children have a learning experience and a living experience if they're not able to stay in their family home. So a very small but very, very important change in the language around that. So that they summarise the key items. We're obviously happy to take any questions or any clarity you're needing around the work that we've presented.
Thank you, Claire. Can I open it for discussion? John?
Thanks, Chair. It's just in the Appendix 3.2, the current learning support centres. On the list there for primary sector, I don't see Georgetown Primary School there. And as I say, I always thought they had this multi-sensory room plus a hydrotherapy pool in the actual primary school, but I just don't see it there.
Claire?
Noted, you're correct, and it's an omission. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chairman. You very much welcome this. It's a major step forward and very important area of activity. It was simply to get a bit of maybe further information with regard to recommendation 2.2.5, where we're talking about continuing to develop the proposals for establishing a specialist education centre, supported living accommodation, etc. I wondered if we had an indication of timescale on when we'll maybe see something come back on that. I mean, I'm conscious that the team involved are doing lots and lots of other things as well, but clearly with capital planning being what it is, the sooner we have an indication of how much it might be, clearly the better it will be for us. So just an idea of what the timescale might be on that, please.
Claire?
I think I'd be happy to bring back a programme at a future meeting. What we wanted to get is an idea that you were happy with these proposals to start off with. The next stage in terms of developing a full business case would include a detailed programme. The reason I quite like the time to actually develop that is there's a number of different ways you could actually deliver specialist facilities and specialist supported living arrangements, and they would all have different procurement periods. And I think we'd probably all agree it's a very important thing to get right and we won't want to rush it. So if I could ask that I can bring a programme back to you at a later committee, then you can get the detail around the delivery on that.
I mean, at the moment, as the report says, we have 7 young people who are actually out with the region already. So not only is it not fair to those young people if we can actually have a facility within the region where they're close to family and friends, but also there's a major expense associated with that, so it is something which we need to progress quickly. Any other members? Dick?
Thanks. Thanks, Chair. I'm glad that we're getting to grips with helping to meet the needs of children on the autistic spectrum disorder scale. It's 7 years since I left the sector. I don't think things have moved on much. Children, I think, were placed in school without staff being properly trained, so I'm welcome that step forward. Some of the learning centres aren't really suitable for meeting the needs of children with severe autism. There's mention of multi-sensory rooms across the region, but I think also that's not children need space within the school as well, where they can have time out. I think that should be part of the audit as well. So I'd like to see more work done on looking at the learning centres and how they're suitable to meet the needs, and also ask what support will principal teachers have as they move forward in helping children meet with these particular additional support needs.
Claire, Andy, would you like to comment?
I'll take the first point and I'll pass the principal teacher point on to Andy. Absolutely noted in terms of everything you're saying about the environment in the learning centre. So as well as undertaking a review of what we have got at the moment and the differences across the region, we've actually been taking a good review of best practice nationally and internationally to say if we're going to move to a different model here, what is the ideal design and what's going to support the learners best. So I absolutely agree with what you're saying. I'll let Andy refer to the point on the principal teachers and the support they'll get.
We're going to have to be looking at the providing them with the opportunity to support their staff, basically. That's one way. That's one of the things we've got to do. The principal teachers have got higher skills. They've got higher experience than the rest of the staff, and we need to ensure they have the space and the time to be able to provide that across their school, and also support other colleagues in other schools if that's possible as well.
Thank you. Any more? No? So can we move to the recommendations? Members are asked to 2.1, note the contents of the Autism Strategy Outline Business Case as given in Appendix 1, and the Outline Business Case Executive Summary as given in Appendix 2. Yep. And 2.2, agree the recommendations as detailed in the Outline Business Case Executive, and they're summarised in 2.21, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4 and 2.5. Thank you, members. If we now move on to item 10. Okay, item 10 is the Children and Young People Bill implementation costs, and the purpose of the report is to provide an update on progress made towards implementing 600 hours of early learning and childcare for eligible children from August 2014 as set out in the Children and Young People Scotland Act 2014, and secondary legislation currently before the Scottish Parliament, and to seek approval for the use of allocated revenue and capital funding which is required to deliver 600 hours entitlement for 2, 3 and 4-year-olds. And we have Hugh Smith to speak to the paper. Is there anything you want to add, Hugh?
Pressing the wrong one. Sorry. To highlight to members the immense amount of work that's been undertaken by our partner providers and our staff in schools to be ready for August 2014 in implementing the 600 hours for 3 and 4-year-olds. I think it's really hard to underestimate the amount of change and that we've asked people to undertake in a very, very short time. Reminding members that we got the guidance from the Scottish Government in November of last year. So in that short space of time to be able to move to where we've got to, which is I think we can pretty much confidently say that we're ready for 3 and 4-year-olds for 600 hours from August, is an immense statement in terms of the commitment from our partners and from our staff. And happy to take any questions on the report.
Just as a wee bit of background, I went to a meeting of the Children and Young People's Executive at COSLA. I think that was in February, and this was very high on the agenda, the amount of work which was required to get this into place, given the rate at which information was coming out of the Scottish Government and information about funding as well. So I do think the team have done a really good job in progressing it to this extent by this stage. So if I can throw it open to members. Gail?
Thank you, Chair. I've had brief conversations with you about this in the past. I have slight concerns about the 2-year-old provision. Personally, I don't think it's necessary, and I think it does give a great disincentive to hard-working families who probably could do with a wee bit more of a leg up. It's quite clear within this that we're under no obligation to go and find them and ensure that those children come into nursery care. And given that many of the children are going to be in very hectic households, we need to ensure that those children, if they do need assistance, and this is now a necessity, are essentially found. But more importantly, you put them in a good environment during the day, but you send them back to the same hectic household in the evening. So are there any sort of sanctions as to better parental involvement, working with the parents, working with the households and the families to ensure that the 2-year-old has a better place at home as well as in nursery?
There's no sanctions, it's an entitlement and families can take it up or not, but there's a clear message within the guidance and the legislation which is about, and what we intend to do in Dumfries and Galloway is build our provision around this 2-year-olds so that we know it's likely that a large number of the families that we'd want to be engaging with will be coming and taking receipt of this entitlement. I think it's likely that the Department of Work and Pensions will be directing families to take up this entitlement as well. So we feel it is an opportunity to be able to build some of the other provision around supporting parents, around employability opportunities as well, so that we're not simply just providing the 2-year-olds, and we'll be looking at that in terms of what does that provision look like? Is that a family centre approach? Many other authorities have come back to the concept of family centres, which we've had locally in a couple of sites, but we probably, we want to develop that as a concept more and plug in other provision, and not just council provision, but other partner provision from health and other services, to be able to make sure we've got almost a one-stop shop where, as you say, those families can get some of the other supports that they need.
Thank you, Hugh. I've got Jim Dempster.
It was in much the same point that Gail was raising about. We're not under any duty to identify these children and self-referral, but I would certainly hope that as an education authority we will try and promote the availability of this scheme so that no one is excluded from taking the opportunity and indeed ensuring that their children are involved within it. And I think the other thing, which has maybe been a bit pedantic, but do we have to use the word workless? It seems to me somehow demeaning on families, and some of them it's through no particular a situation other than they cannot, for whatever reason, either take up employment or can they find employment. And it would be helpful, and I know that may be the phraseology used in legislation or in Scottish Government documentation, but I think I would like to see us try and modify that kind of language, because I don't think it helps the people that are affected by it.
Absolutely agree with you, and so we've used the wording that's come through the legislation. We have been waiting for a national campaign, which we sort of has been promised, and we were contacted yesterday about how many posters and leaflets that we wanted, which will be from the national government in terms of promoting this. That will then inform how we promote that locally ourselves. But we have been thinking about what would we want to brand that, but obviously we need to connect that into whatever the Scottish Government's branding is, because if we create a different title and use a different language, then it will create confusion. I mean, one example that's been talked of in other areas is talking about strong start, you kind of moving on from the short start. So there are different options that we will absolutely be exploring. But at this date, we've not had any of that information from the Scottish Government. They're investing in a national campaign. We need to follow on the back of that to make sure that we're matching our local publicity and literature with whatever they're saying, so we don't create that confusion.
Jim?
Grateful for that explanation and that response. I think the only other thing I would ask, and I wouldn't want any opportunity to be provided to identify children, but sometimes numbers are more helpful than percentages. And if maybe the next time the report comes, if we could see how many children in each area were actually taken up or being included in this arrangement as well as a percentage, I think that'd be helpful.
Can I just say from our side, absolutely, at this point in time, we don't have any of that. These are all the figures we're working on are estimates. So come August, we're planning for these numbers, but we're not sure whether we'll get this or we might get higher. And we're working with the Department of Work and Pensions around what they're able to share with us, which isn't a significant amount of information at this point.
Thanks for that, Chair. And it's also with the absolute assurance that children won't be able to be identified with the information that we receive.
Yeah, I think part of the difficulty has been the reluctance of the Department of Work and Pensions to actually pass over information that they hold in terms of the households.
But I think your point is well made, because in some of our rural communities it will be one or two children, so we will always have to be very careful, and that's one of the issues around, as you pointed out, about the workless and the stigma. But it is a targeted provision, and it will be targeted. So I think, a 2-year-old entering into one of these places that we provide, there will be that issue around locally that it will be highly visible in terms of the status or the benefit received for the family.
No wanting to hog the floor, Chair, I'm pleased, because upper Nithsdale's 8%, and if that equates to 1 or 2 children, it might be better if we just included in Nithsdale and we get a number. Maybe privately we could share that information, but not necessarily have it in the public domain if there is a risk that a child might be affected by it.
David?
Thanks, Chair. I notice on page 170 the Scottish Government saying that we've got 174 children taking up this entitlement in 2014-15. Through the independent, private and voluntary sectors, along with the schools, do we have sufficient places to take these children on board? And I note what Councillor Dempster was saying about identifying youngsters. I think we've spoken about it in other committees about sharing information, and I think it's important that, like the social work, health, social work and that, will be able to identify these youngsters as well, and that they come on board and supply that information to you, so that you can go out and speak to the families and if they want to take up the offer or not. But it's accommodation. Do we have sufficient accommodation?
That's the hard question. we've asked at this stage for year one, we're looking at partner providers being able to meet the large majority because our school provision isn't ready. The different requirements for 2-year-olds in terms of rest area and changing areas, and that's the kind of the works and the capital works that we're looking for year 2 and year 3. At this stage, we've asked for expressions of interest. We've had quite a large number come forward in terms of childminders and preschool and daycare providers. And we anticipate in our larger areas, larger kind of urban areas, that we will be able to meet the demand. We may well have an individual child identified in a very rural area that may be a struggle, and then that will be, for the year one, it will be about trying to individually match a child into a provision. There's no support for funding from in terms of transport, so that will be a key issue as well. And so at this point, I suppose, Councillor, I wouldn't be able to say 100% yes, but we do know that in response to concerns from across Scotland, that the Scottish Government have delayed the implementation of the duty on local authorities to provide this until the 31st of October. And that's in recognition that actually we've all said this is a real challenge. The summer holidays come right in the middle of our implementation. A lot of our providers don't work over the summer holidays. So we're working hard to make sure that we're ready for August, but we're absolutely ready for October the 31st. And we will do our best to do that, but we may struggle with 1 or 2 children, and that will then have to be about what can we think in terms of different ideas and different provision.
Rob?
Thanks, Chairman. Very much welcome the report, and like you, would certainly pay tribute to Hugh and his team for the amount of work and effort that's gone into this. I mean, it's a massive change in what we're doing in this area of activity. I do think it's very welcome. I think the 2-year-old provision will quite likely assist people who and children who are very much in need of it. And I think this is a positive development and a welcome one. But having said that, I recognise also that it is major. It's been a major challenge for this council, major challenge for every authority. I'm not sure if I picked it up in the report, so if it is there, my apologies. But it was simply given that we know that this is very big, and that there is still much of it which is on the way towards implementation. There are bits that we don't know. It was really just to find out what plans you have for further updating the Education Committee. I mean, I don't know if a further update this year will be sensible, but maybe certainly early in the new year, as we get a clearer idea of how things are panning out and what's working well, what needs to be tweaked, etc. I think it's one that it would be good for us to be keeping an eye on fairly regularly.
Yeah. Hugh, have you got any idea when the next update should come before committee?
I think early in the new year would probably be helpful for us in terms of, I think that the next few months and the next term are going to be very tight in terms of the amount of work that's needed to be done to get the delivery. So I think if we could come back with, we'll know the numbers coming forward by then. We'll have clearer ideas of where our key challenges are going to be. So I think it would be very helpful early in the new year to be able to report back to members on progress and plans based on the take-up.
Graham?
Thanks, Chair. I note here that the Dumfries and Galloway share of this funding will be approximately 370,000 for a part school year. Any indication what it's going to be for a full school year? That's the first part of the question. Second part is purchase of services for 2-year-olds who are looked after or subject to kinship care is 92,000 in 2014-15, and it's 131,000 the subsequent year. Is that included in that 370,000? And the next question is expansion of local authority non-staff costs of 200,000. Is that the capital expenditure, or is there a further capital expenditure required to put this in place? The expansion of local authority, second box in the expenditure column, non-staff costs, equipment, is that the whole capital expenditure, or is there further capital expenditure? And where's it coming from, and what is it?
The wrong one? Okay. The first one is that we do have the full-year figure, and I thought it was in the report, and unfortunately if my colleague Karen was here, she'd be able to tell you. But that's just because we're really doing 2/3 of the whole year. So they have identified, I have to say, the figures have come in quite late as well, but that it's a full year based on a pro rata of, it's a third more. Yes, yeah. I think it's the final term is one of our shortest terms. So it's so in terms of the next one, the separate the separation. They are two separate bits of the book for looked after children. So in terms of the looked after children, the Act is very clear, is that we should be basing whatever provision we offer to looked after 2-year-old children on their child's plan, not on you're eligible, entitled to 600 hours, because actually that may be the last thing that the professionals and the parent and the child would be thinking would be the right thing. But that could be an option as well. So it would be whatever the plan is, we would resource through that funding to make sure that they were, in a sense, getting an equivalence to the 600 hours. But that could be a parenting program, that could be intensive work with the family, it could be lots of different things. But they wanted to make a clear distinction between the two, because there's much more complex needs around for looked after children. And the last, which is capital, and I'm hoping I can pass over to Claire.
We've kept the capital line separate in terms of the capital adjustments that got to be made to accommodate the revenue work that Hugh's delivering on. That money's coming separately from government, and we've had a first stage agreement in terms of the allocation to this council from government. So that will be funded through the government programme.
Are you allowed to divulge how much that is?
I believe it's been agreed and it's in line with the amount that we've put in the appendix.
Press the button. It's that flashing green light, it confuses me. I suppose one of the issues is that we are in an incremental kind of developmental process, and that this is our initial scoping in terms of capital expenditure, the ongoing and the development, and the pull through in terms of take-up of places for 2-year-olds, and also the wider ambitions of the Scottish Government in terms of looking at 1,000 hours a year for a child of 2, 3 and 4. Obviously would require significant more resourcing and more planning. So I think it would be fair to say, Claire, that this is where we are in terms of what we're delivering immediately. But that planning will be determined in part by take-up, by issues in terms of accessibility that will be highlighted as we start to offer the entitlement.
Just to concur that we are going to have to keep reviewing it as and when the information becomes more available, and that will not be into the summer. And just to emphasise the point I made, it's the first tranche of capital money it's agreed. I think government have acknowledged that there's the potential for more capital monies, and we're working with the various bodies to help secure that as and when we know exactly how much we're going to need.
Ron?
Yeah, I think that's important. We can't underestimate the challenges still ahead with this in the 2-year-olds. I think you've done absolutely brilliant in the timescales that you've been, the challenging timescales from only, the guidance was published in May, and the capital cost was only confirmed on 23rd of June. I think the whole aspect of it, getting this provision in place for 2-year-olds is really, really good. But I think the challenges that have been put in front of us, especially in the costs and the transport, there's no budgets for that, and the legal challenges that could actually come forward as well if we don't provide this. And if we do the whole aspect, I think it's in here, well, the realisation that childcare provision for others could be displaced, so we can actually get 2-year-olds in, which doesn't help others within this. So there are lots and lots of challenges within here, and we can't underestimate that. And last, I think the Scottish Government has recognised that the costs haven't been fully met in this, and there won't be another tranche. But there will be challenges within that as well, because other councils will look at how it's not confirmed how that would then be dispersed over the councils. So I think there are maybe challenges within that as well for us. So whilst overall we welcome this kind of move forward, we can't underestimate the challenges that have been put forward to Dumfries and Galloway because of the uncertainty how this is going to play out. If we, he said, even if it's 1 or 2 people, these 1 or 2 people can actually challenge through the courts, and this could have a cost to Dumfries and Galloway Council, because it being enshrined in law, we would then have that obligation. So all this uncertainty creates, and you know, I'm really pleased with the way that officers have risen to this challenge, and but I think as members we can't underestimate the challenges still ahead with this.
Yeah, I think we only very short distance above a very steep learning curve in terms of this 2-year-old provision. Ted, did you want to speak? No. David?
It was just regarding the capital funding, Chair. Are the independent private voluntary sector, will they be able to bid into this to extend their premises, if necessary, to accommodate the youngsters?
You?
We've no plans for that at this stage. What we're working towards for year 2 would be a mixed economy again, by being able to offer for 2-year-olds, for the increased numbers of 2-year-olds in year 2, we estimate that there should be enough provision across the 2 partner providers and ourselves to be able to deliver for that 27% of the 2-year-olds. That we pay, and we would be paying a good rate in terms of, and expect that part of the responsibilities of a provider would be to ensure that they had the appropriate provision, and that would obviously be part of our quality checks as well.
David?
So what you're saying is that the capital funding will be retained for the premises that are council run. But if we want the independent private voluntary sector to improve their premises to take on the youngsters, or adapt the premises to take on the youngsters, they've got to fund it themselves.
They already are taking on for this year. They're proposing to take on for the 2-year-olds. So they're and that therefore they have the provision. The increase, the doubling in effect of the number of children that would be looking for in year 2 is that, and I think Councillor Nicholson's issue about displacement is a key issue, is that we want to grow the provision in terms of childcare, but actually if we were to suck up so much childcare in our partner provision that can offer more flexibility, there would be a real risk of displacement for families that require childcare for work purposes as well. But we know at this point in time that our school estate was not set up to ever undertake the provision of 2-year-olds. Our partner providers were always mainly set up on the basis that they would take children from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 and upwards. So they have the changing facilities, they have the rest areas. We don't have any of those facilities in our schools. So if we're to offer this, and that we know from what families say to us is that they want to be able to have a one-stop shop, that's an expectation in the Act, that the local authority moves into providing wraparound and one-stop shops for a family, that we have to get our provision in order. And in terms of the capital allocation, to be able to do that, and not across the whole estate, we're looking at key hubs in areas where, and then our partner providers would be the spokes to that, but key hubs where we can offer, where there'll be significantly numbers of 2-year-olds, we can offer some in-house provision, and where we can wrap around some of the other provision that we'd like to do in terms of family support, in terms of employability as well.
Graham? No? Any other speakers? No? Colin?
Thank you, Chair. It's exactly, I'm going to say exactly what I said at the last time this was brought up at committee. I have a real problem understanding the rationale behind this. I mean, surely it is people who are working that need a hand and their kids from an early age taken and childcare provided. I mean, I know young couples who, especially the mother, can't afford to go back to work because they can't afford childcare for their 2-year-old, 3-year-old, whatever. I just don't understand when people are workless or whatever label you want to put on them, they are going to be at home and capable of looking after their young children. People who are working and actually inputting some financial benefit into the system would be better off having this. It should either be for everybody or nobody. I think it's really unfair to differentiate and to supply this to people who are actually best placed to be looking after their children.
Any other speakers? No? I think it's been a useful discussion. Thanks to you for all the background information you've been able to give in answer to the questions. So can we move to the recommendations? Members are asked to 2.1, note the progress made to date in relation to the implementation of 600 hours early learning and childcare. Noted? Yep. 2.2, agree the measures reflected within this report as detailed in section 4.2 of the agreement. Yep. 2.3, agree to allow the necessary arrangements to put in place as outlined in the recommendation. Yep. And 2.4, agree to the capital expenditure of 1.9 million over financial years 2014-15 and 16-17 as detailed in the appendix. Thank you. So we move to item 11, School Let's Progress Report and Consideration of Revised Policy. The purpose of this report is to update members on the current work being taken to further develop the management of School Let's and to seek agreement on an updated policy. And Gillian will introduce it and Richard Greaves and see if he'll answer questions if needed. Gillian?
Thank you very much, Chair. Members agreed to further work being undertaken to progress the development of School Let's in November. This has been complex work. I had expected to bring more to you at this point, but it's been quite clear that it is a two-step process. The two parts of the work that we see are firstly to revise the arrangements with the management and administration of School Let's, and that's what's before you today. But secondly, a review of the school facilities charging policy, and that work is yet to come. It's been quite clear to me that our education service policy has not been kept in line with operational practice, and I think that has been part of some of the practical difficulties our schools have had in implementing a consistent school-let arrangement. We've not had a central overview, as I reported back in November. We've not had a central overview of the way we manage our school lets. We now are in a position that we can do that, but it's going to take some change in culture in terms of how the schools manage the lets and in terms of the way the lets are booked. I have tabled for your interest the current school lets policy, which is 2007. You can see from that, I hope everyone's got a copy, but I don't have it electronically, it's not on the public website, and I'm actually quite pleased about that because it's significantly out of date. So that does indicate some of the inconsistencies that we have been operating within. Thank you, Melanie. There are three key issues, as I see it, three key outstanding issues. Firstly, the dual-use sites. 13 of our secondary schools manage school lets independently. We have no ongoing issues with those secondary schools. But 3 of our secondary schools, Dalbeattie High School, Castle Douglas High School and Kirkcudbright Academy, worked in conjunction with Community and Customer Services as dual use. Following members' decisions at the budget setting time, the dual use arrangements were revoked and the lets came back to education. That was happening at the same time as we were reviewing the management arrangements. There have been a number of issues raised regarding that, which are outlined in 3.7. The second main area of concern are fees and charges. Members have been keen in the past to look at income generation due to fees and charges, but also at the same time looking to increase use. Sometimes those two positions have not been easy for schools to implement together. We either open our schools up and enhance their use, or we try and maximise income. The two positions don't sit comfortably together in some areas, particularly where we're expecting janitorial overtime and the devolved school budget has to take that budget pressure. I reported back in November that at the moment we lose in the region of £40,000 per year through using school lets. And the third part, which I think is more manageable, are rules around key holding and security. The head teacher is the lead tenant of the school. They are concerned that with many lets in the evenings, they remain responsible, although they're not on site. And we have some assurances to give to head teachers as to the remits of their responsibility. So as I say, the reviewed school lets policy is before you. I am very aware there is still work to be done with regards to charging. Well, Richard is here today so we can take any specific questions. The harmonisation of fees and charges was brought in 2011 and it has worked successfully in most areas, but perhaps it is timely to review where we're at and how we do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Gillian. Members? Colin?
Thank you, Chair. I'm just taking up Jane Maitland's mantle from yesterday. Don't tell her I said that. It's just some... Sorry? Surely she's got better things to do. I'd just like some clarity, basically, on the school let process. There seems to be an awful lot of ambiguity and confusion. I mean, I'm talking about Kirkcudbright Academy. I can't speak for other places, but sometimes they're being told that the school is going to be open and available all summer. Somebody put it on, I think it was the sports Facebook page the other night, that due to the school being closed all summer, that boot camp will be held in the open air. So that is given the inference that the school is not going to be open. I put an EMES in asking for this information a few weeks back, and I was told that there would be admin staff in place all summer to take bookings. But out with that process, I was told that the person who actually does take the bookings and the admin is actually on holiday all summer. So there's nobody there. So there is absolute confusion. We really need some clarity set down. This is what you need to do. This is when it's going to be open, and this is how much it costs.
I absolutely agree, Councillor. And it is one school, and I ask for your understanding on that. I think there have been a number of issues regarding that. I was assured that the school office would be open for bookings at least 2 or 3 days per week. And if that's not the case, I need to explore that. But we have 15 secondary schools which operate clearly and consistently throughout the year. And if there are individual school matters, I will take that on board.
It's just clarity, Gillian. I know you're bringing another report, but it's absolutely fine. Members will get the opportunity to deal with all these things then. But on the educational, last page, educational, social work and community services, scale of charges for financial year 2007-8. If you take, for example, the hire of a community school hall at a standard rate of £10 per hour, and somebody takes it for a couple of hours, it's £20. Does it include the cleaning surcharge? Because it didn't make reference to that in the document. It's sort of, you have to try and work out yourself whether that's applicable or no.
Yeah, this is the hot potato, the cleaning surcharge and the janitorial overtime. This is what I meant by operational practice not being consistent with the harmonisation of fees and charges. This is the 2007 document. However, the harmonisation was agreed in 2011. There is no availability for, there should have been no charging, additional charging for cleaning and janitorial, because of the confusion that then leads for individuals not knowing whether they're going to be due for that or not, whether they're booking something at 6 o'clock or at 7 o'clock, not knowing whether the janitor's on overtime or not. So it had to be very clear, and that was the basis of the 2011 paper. But as what I have established, that this 2007 policy is still circulating in schools, it is still being operationalised, and we need to sort that out. So yes, you're right,
So is this a holding paper now, and we'll get something more specific later on?
What I would like to bring to you is, well, the policy is now, as I see it, in terms of what we aim to do, the core principles, responsibilities, but we still require some procedural guidance regarding charging. And I'm happy to take members' views on how Education Committee wishes us to progress that work.
Gail?
Thank you, Chair. I'm really disappointed that the 2011 piece of work that Richard and various others did, which harmonised fees and charges, has not been universally circulated right across the piece. And I think that comes down to an issue we've had with this problem for years now, that we're not communicating, we're not promoting, the newspapers aren't picking up that these facilities are available for hire. They're not emphasising that actually a lot of the facilities, particularly within our PPP schools, under the harmonised fees and charges that were agreed in 2011, are often cheaper than other community facilities, and they offer really good value for money. And as a council and as area committees, we've been really lax in promoting, the fantastic facilities within our schools and that they are available. So I think we really need to be much more proactive about that and actually get that information out that this is defunct, it no longer exists, chuck it in the bin, get the harmonised fees and charges out there and make sure that everybody knows that and the communities know that. Because certainly our community council, I would doubt, has ever known that it could hire a room in a school for nothing. And they pay to use the lesser hall at Lockerbie Town Hall instead. Presumably all of this applies to the PPP schools as well. It's right across the piece.
Yes, absolutely. And I may say that the information we hold on PPP schools is much more detailed. We do have a great deal of information. And many of our schools do use, I would like to think that most of our schools use the harmonisation of fees and charges, but because of our lack of management information, I cannot assure you that that is the case.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, there is utter confusion out there. I was at a community council the other night. The secretary of the community council announced that there wouldn't be a meeting because the school wasn't going to be open. This was Newton Stewart. I had spoken to the janitor as I went in prior to the meeting, and he said to me he was coming in to open the school for the next community council meeting. So, there's two sides of the not speak, but the secretary was adamant that she'd been told that the school would not be open. We need to have a standard charge per size of room or however you want to do it, with no additional add-ons, so that people know exactly when they rent a room for the duration of their course or class or whatever it is, that that's what it's going to cost them. Unless maybe they spill a barrel of beer on the floor, well, that's a different story. But there's got to be a real charge at the start with no add-ons. These people can't be responsible for the fact that janitors maybe in overtime or whatever. That's got to be included in the cost of the hall when they start, in my opinion.
Can I ask a question of committee? Perhaps this is slightly unusual, but some of the problems we have faced is that janitors have working hours, uncontracted working hours. I cannot require people to work overtime. And therefore, if a school, in normal cases, so in that situation, if a janitor agrees to work, or if we manage to put some supply janitor cover in place, if we can get additional resource to open the school, then the head teacher may agree to that let. But if the head teacher is not able to get the resource, the overtime, the supply in order to open that school, then we would expect the head teacher to reserve the right not to make that let. And that, I think, is where we are having some problems, where we have people working on their contracted terms and conditions and then requiring them to work out with that.
And again.
Thank you, Chair. Gillian, I just had a thought and I wonder if you would take it on board. I wonder, have you thought of talking to the parent councils to encourage them to take more responsibilities to help the school? It can be a joint fundraising between the school and the parent council, because in the end, whatever parent council raise will go back to the school. This is a lesson I have learned from a voluntary organisation I heavily involved. We're now renting out our room really good with room hires, and the only way we promote this is through our volunteers. We have more training for our volunteers. We have keys card for every volunteers, and we could rent our room out during different times. So it's working that way. So just a suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I certainly will take that on board. Key holding is a key issue, and it's about being responsible for the building. Who do we give keys to for our council assets? Who do we give keys to when we have sensitive pupil information in that building? And what controls do we have over that? And those are the things that we're trying to balance with opening up our school estate.
Yeah, as Julian says, I mean, this is also about information gathering. This is going to be a follow-up paper about the charging policy, and so what she's looking for is members' advice and what sort of options she should be exploring in order to present them to the November committee meeting. Colin?
Thank you, Chair. I know it was advice, but it's just maybe an idea that rather than the head teacher scrabbling around maybe at the last minute trying to get janitor cover for somebody who wants to wet the hall on a Monday night. Could it not be possible to suggest that the hall is available every Monday and Wednesday evening and there is somebody in place, and try and get classes to run on these 2 or 3 evenings a week so that people know, without having to wait for a reply from the head teacher, you know, can I have the hall on Monday night? Oh, I'll have to wait to see if I can get a janitor. No, it's available every Monday night, every Wednesday night, you know, have it set in stone.
Again, thank you for that. I think it's that aggregation of resource, if you like. So if you're looking for a hall, then we know centrally exactly what is open, what hours are available for people, and we can control that and advise customers from a central location. But thank you for that.
Dick?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Chair. I think we do need a solution to the problem of staffing the school. No point having a resource if we can't open it. And I think we take Ying's point of view that we should need to involve the community and the parent council in it. From experience at Eastriggs was supposed to be built as a community school, which was quite a forerunner before the Unitary Authority. But once the Unitary Authority came, we got rid of the community input into helping to run the community facilities after school, and it's been very difficult to manage bookings in the Eastriggs Community School because of the janitorial position. So I think we need to look very closely at involving parent council and the community in helping to run after school, and obviously it has to be managed properly. But I think that has to be a move for the future.
Gail?
Thank you, Chair, for letting me back in a second time. I think we're probably complicating this more than is actually necessary. We already have a very clear policy and booking system for the PPP schools that was agreed by Education Committee. We just haven't moved that across into the rest of our schools. And the majority of community groups and sports groups and what have you, they're not booking on an ad hoc basis at the last minute. You know, we know that the Community Council is the 3rd Tuesday of the month and so on and so forth. So those last minute emergency bookings would be very unusual. And within the PPP system, I think they have to give at least 2 weeks notice, except for emergencies or last minute things where they will try and accommodate. Now, maybe we just need to put a policy that's fairly straightforward like that in place, that with respect, you try and give a minimum of 2 weeks notice, and we will accommodate if it's shorter notice where possible. But you can't guarantee that because, as I say, I think the majority of football clubs, sports clubs, whatever, they all operate on the same night each week. So there shouldn't be a massive issue transferring it over. And I think the PPP policy could probably be a good benchmark to start from.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. I think we do need to have a change, as I mentioned before. There are perhaps just a small number of situations where we are still working with established ways. People who are used to pay and play, people who are used to making last minute bookings. And it will be difficult for them to move into more longer term planning, but we'll get there.
Yeah, I think when this was first raised many years ago at the Education Committee, it's something we just got out of the habit of doing, was actually using schools outside, the sort of 9 till 3:30, etc. And we have invested huge amounts of money within the region in our schools, and we intend doing that in future. And we do need to make the best use of this. So I think this is a very good start to a revised process. If there are no more speakers, can we move to James?
Thanks. There's only one thing. I think we shouldn't have random openings, and by that I mean if a facility in Annan or Langham is available at 9 o'clock on a Saturday night for public use, it should be the same in Stranraer and Sanquhar. We can't have some schools providing a service and some schools no. The public at large should be able to be in a position to understand you can go to a school between X and Y and that school will be available for you. How you manage that I don't know, but that's my view, so that it's no a localised matter, it's a regional matter. And I think one of the other things is you don't want us to establish a policy that then compromises the ongoing future of community centres or the like. And it may be the simple thing is to standardise lets so that the community centre or the school, the price is the same, that folk don't suddenly think, well, the school's £2 an hour cheaper, we'll go there and abandon the complete and total use of the community facility elsewhere. And that then becomes a problem for the council and for the community. And I think, and it's already been said umpteen times today, folk just want to know why they can get in, how they can get in, and when they can get in. And how much it's going to cost, John. You're right. And I think that the simplest methodology for this would be, much as you'll know, like this, Gillian, is that we get a range of options brought back to members to consider. And we can maybe mix and match, but it's a range of suggestions of how best we deal with this going forward.
Well, that always was the intention, that there would be a range of options to be presented to members, and that's what Julian's been working on and will continue to work on, and they'll come to the November committee meeting. Do you want to say anything else? Okay, so no one else is indicating they want to speak. Can we move to the recommendations? Wait for it. Members are asked to 2.1 agree the school's let policy is detailed in the appendix for implementation from August 2014. And 2.2 agree that the report providing options around the school facilities charging policy is brought to Education Committee in November 2014, recognising this will be fully impact assessed. Agreed? I have no other business, but we do have an item which we need to take in private. So can we agree under item 13 to adopt a resolution to exclude the public from the meeting in terms of paragraph 4 of part 1 of Schedule 7A of the Local Government Act 1973. Are you in agreement? In which case